If you're feeling God call you to pivot life as you know it by leaving your career plans to start an online business, and you're terrified of how you'd ever actually pull that off, then you're a mama with a calling, and this is the podcast for you. Here's where we'll talk about everything from choosing the right business and running it as a mom to biblical inspiration and motivation to conquer your fears. Because even though it's causing you some anxiety, you're also excited because you know God's calling you to it. And that means you're headed to a life with more joy, fulfillment, and purpose like you've always wanted. Hi, I'm Alexia Carrillo, fellow mama with a calling, and I'm passionate about helping other moms like you step into their calling and not stay stuck in their career for fear of going against the grain. I believe it's okay to pivot and follow God's calling on your life without the guilt or shame for not doing what the world says you should do. This is the Mama with a Calling podcast, where we'll figure out how you can actually make this wild calling on your life become a reality. Let's grab some coffee and dive in. Hey, and welcome back to the Mama with a Calling podcast. So before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to remind you about our Black Friday special that opens up this Friday on Black Friday and goes through Monday. I'm actually launching a new Mama with a Calling membership group. I am so excited about this because you all have requested a group like this for a while now. The main focus of the group is going to be to provide support and accountability through community and coaching as you step into life as a Christian entrepreneur, as a mom, all the things. And every month we will focus on a key area that impacts your success. So things like money mindset, imposter syndrome, time management, etc., all the things that are affecting you in this season that you're in. And each of these will have a lesson every month that's focusing on mindset in some way that's founded in biblical principles, and then practical tips and strategies to help you actually implement that. So we'll have a challenge or an activity to help really dig into this area and make those impactful changes by doing things that are going to actually help you solidify, instead of hearing it and it going in one ear and you're like, this is awesome, and then you move on past that. Like if you listen to this podcast sometimes, you probably are like, that was amazing, that's exactly what I needed to hear. And then you move on with life, right? Kids are in the way, you have everything going on. And what happens is we hear something, but we don't actually take the time to do anything about it. And that's what this group is going to let you do. It's going to give you a place to actually think about this just one area, have like a small training around it, take some time to do something about it, and really start seeing those changes happen. And then there will also be coaching calls, accountability threads, and of course the community itself to really help answer any questions that you have. If you don't want to work on the focus of the month, you don't have to. You can come to those coaching calls and just ask questions about your business, do the accountability and things, or you can kind of use it all, right? Focus on the area to make some changes, get the accountability, ask questions about that or anything in your business, all of those things. And all of this is designed to keep you focused on God and following Him, even in the face of struggles as an entrepreneur. Because this journey is important, but it's not going to be easy. And it is so tempting to pull in new age things or to start relying on yourself. And it's just such a habit for us, or at least it was for me, to turn to what I know when I'm stressed, right? And that means, thinking that I can control things, coming up with a better plan, whatever that is. And the goal of this group is to really keep you focused and to shift the way you see things, to focus on what God actually wants you to do, and keeping that the focus of everything you do. So this Black Friday deal starts, like I said, on Friday, and you can join the Mama with a Calling membership group for only $15 a month. That's just this first time price here. Plus, the first 10 people get invited to be a part of the Q1 Mastermind starting in January 2022. So to find out more, go to mamawithacalling.com/Black Friday. And at the end of this episode, I'm actually going to talk more about what we're going to be doing in January to kick off the group. So stick around for that. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So today we're going to be talking all about boundaries, what they are and why they matter for entrepreneurs. So a little bit of a backstory on how these came up for me and why I'm telling you about them. So one of the biggest areas that I've had to work on as an entrepreneur is what I would call the area of confidence. So not the kind where I think I'm pretty or something, but the kind of confidence where I'm sure of myself, confident in my abilities, getting really clear on the fact that I'm clearly chosen to do this. And, I don't care what others think, and I don't care if they like what I'm doing, all of that, because I just know that this is what I'm called to do, right? That was not the way I operated. I struggled with this so much that I constantly found myself uncertain about everything in my business. I was easily swayed by different things that coaches said. I would get courses and do this and that, and I just kept bouncing around. And I didn't know what I really wanted to do, so I just kept doing whatever other people told me to do. And actually, I guess I did know sometimes what I didn't want to do, but I wasn't really brave enough to actually say so. So I thought it was just mean or something to say anything against what somebody was telling me. So I just kept doing whatever other people said was good to do. And actually, this ended up with me kind of moving forward begrudgingly, like listening to them, and then causing me to doubt my business on more than one occasion because I wasn't standing up for what I actually wanted to do and was just kind of doing whatever everybody told me to do. And I couldn't really figure out why I was pivoting so much. The biggest area that confidence showed up in, actually beyond this area of my business, was actually balancing my life and my business. So I constantly felt bad for either working too much or not enough, and always feeling like I wanted to do the opposite of what I was actually doing, because I wasn't sure of myself and how much I really wanted to work versus how much I wanted to focus on being a mom and a homemaker. I was constantly offended and irritated over anything that anyone said about any of it. And I knew this wasn't right. Like, it just felt weird. And maybe you can relate to this, that you're just finding yourself sort of frustrated because you're in your business and you're not doing the things that you know that you should be doing, or you're just constantly kind of agitated at family or friends or your spouse or your kids around your business. And you're like, what is the deal? Like, you can just feel this is kind of off. And for me, I knew it wasn't right. And I didn't want to be so irritable all the time, right? So I started really diving into this and actually got some counseling through BetterHelp. I can put a link in the description below, but I love that. It was just on my phone on Zoom. And it was there that I learned about this concept of boundaries and how it was affecting not only my business, but actually multiple areas of my life. I had no clue. So it was such a life-changing thing for me. Like, seriously, my eyes are just opened still. I'm still working on this. And it's just been amazing what I've learned about myself, how things have changed, and boundaries was a huge part of this. And so I'm bringing you this episode to talk about what boundaries are, why they're important, and how they can show up in your business, and some tips for you to kind of start diving into this or thinking about it and seeing if boundaries is something that is affecting you as well. So to get started, let's talk about what boundaries are. So first, this comes from the book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, Boundaries. So there's a series there. It's like boundaries in kids, boundaries in marriage, boundaries with teens, I think, and then just good old boundaries. That's the one I got. And I also got the workbook. So I would highly suggest getting both of those if you really want to dive into this. I'll put the links for those below. It's not really that expensive to get them, and it's just been really, really good. So according to the book, to them, so they are Christian psychologists, they explain boundaries like this. It's like you have a yard, and I'm going to be paraphrasing. So it's like you have a yard, right? You have a yard with a fence around it. And this fence is the boundary of your yard, right? It makes it very clear where your property is and the next person begins, right? So in your yard are all the things that you believe in, that you value, etc. And they are what you're responsible for, not what other people are responsible for. And you're not responsible for other people's stuff. You're just responsible for what's in your yard. And whatever's in your yard, whatever's in your boundary, that defines you, not what somebody else has in their yard, what you have in your yard. And this is helping you clearly see what is yours, what is not yours. And it causes you to take responsibility for your own feelings, your own choices, and your own actions, but also lets you realize that others don't have to impact what's inside of your boundary. So I really like this explanation of like the visualization of the yard. And obviously in business and in life, it's not really a yard. It's actually your thoughts and your feelings and emotions, and on the spiritual side of things, what you believe, right? Who you are and where other people stop and you begin. And this is really, really important, like I said, in numerous areas of your life. But we're going to be talking about it today in terms of, I guess, relationships and also in terms of your business. So that's what boundaries are. So just like a really big overview. And actually, one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the book is he said that God had boundaries. God says, like, this is a sin. And that's a boundary. Like, you just can't do that. Or, this is the consequence if you do this. Like, those are just boundaries. Or that, God's like, you can't see my face. Like, these are just things you can't do. And he just sets those boundaries in place. I thought that was really interesting and helped me just feel better about adopting this concept of boundaries. So that's what they are. So why are they important? What's so amazing about these boundaries are how universal they have been across my life. I didn't even realize how important they were, or that I didn't really have them at all until I started reading this book, and it has been life-changing. Now, I'm not going to dive into all the ways it's affected my life, though it has been pretty amazing. On this episode, I wanted to talk about how this concept of boundaries plays a really big role, or can play a really big role in your business and your life as an entrepreneur and a mom. So many of you have healthy boundaries in place to where you know exactly what you're doing, you feel completely confident in all of your choices, and you're not worried about what other people think about what you're doing. And that's fantastic. That's awesome. But for the rest of us, we may have some challenges with boundaries and not even know it. Or based on what I've already said, maybe you're like, oh, I clearly have issues with this. So how can you tell if you have issues with boundaries? So one of the telltale signs of a boundary being an issue is feeling aggravated, irritated, stressed, angry, those kind of feelings. And I don't know about you, but I was always taught that Christians, quote unquote, shouldn't get mad. So when I felt angry, this is my whole life, but particularly in my business, when I was feeling angry about things, I always thought that I needed to stuff that down, or that I was really just a bad person for having that thought in the first place. And I needed to get rid of it because that is not the way I'm supposed to act. Instead, I need to have kindness and be polite and things. And that's true. I mean, I don't need to go off the rails on people all the time or anything. But what happens when you operate from that place of constantly trying to not show people anger, or at least this is what happened to me, is that it resulted in years of like people pleasing. And it turns out that being angry is actually a sign that a boundary has been crossed. And when I learned that, I was like, what? This is something that can be, our emotions tell us something is off or something is good, I guess. But these kind of quote unquote negative emotions, like anger, sadness, things like that, it tells you that something has happened, right? God gave us the ability to be angry. He gets angry. It doesn't mean that we obviously need to live in anger, but anger can be a sign that something is off, like a boundary has been crossed. So if you constantly try to ignore your anger, then you're not going to realize that you have a boundary issue, and you will essentially live a life of no boundaries because you're not going to really see that as a boundary issue. And like I said, the people-pleasing thing happened because I simply thought that I needed to adjust whatever I liked or didn't like to appease the other person. So what I was doing, instead of having a clear boundary of this is what I like, that's what you like, we don't affect each other kind of a thing, I didn't have a boundary. And it's like, wait, you don't like what I'm doing? Let me change what I'm doing so that my boundary looks like my yard, my values looks like yours, so that you will be happy with me, right? And that creates a lot of inner anger and frustration and aggravation and bitterness and things because I'm not living a life that aligns with what I actually value. So as an entrepreneur, this can really come into play in various stages of entrepreneurship and just different areas of life along the way. Maybe you're constantly agitated when you're trying to work, but your mom keeps calling and wants to talk to you all the time. And you miss your entire work block again because she called again. And you've told her, but she's not listening. Or you feel defensive when people ask you all the time, why are you quitting your job? Just to be a stay-at-home mom and give all this stuff up? Or are you going to go back to work soon? Those kinds of things. If you get mad about that stuff, something could be a boundary issue being crossed here. So in the first one, for example, with your time. So a healthy boundary for handling a mom who calls in the middle of that might look something like this. So you might say first to yourself that you're going to use this work block for your work, and you aren't available for anything else, because your boundary, your value is, I value work. I have 2 hours while my kid naps or whatever it is. And so this is really important to me. And I'm deciding this is what I want to do with my time. Like you just decided, right? So even if somebody else wants to talk to you, even if somebody else wants to interrupt you, whatever, it's like, no, I'm doing what I want to do, right? I'm doing my work time right now. And so the first step is telling yourself that you're going to actually do that, right? You're going to set this work block aside and that you're not available for anything else, just stating it to yourself. And you're going to set the phone on do not disturb or put it in the other room or something. And it can also mean letting your mom or whoever it is that typically interrupts you, just sending them a quick text and letting them know that they can talk to you before or after, but you're not going to be available during this time block. And then if she calls anyway, you have options here. So an unhealthy boundary response would be to get mad because she's calling and not respecting the time, and she's quote unquote making you talk when you specifically told her not to call you. You know, you can tell it's kind of like an agitation. This is totally from personal experience. And that's because the boundary is crossed. And here was the big one for me, and it might be the case for you. It's actually because you think that everyone should just know what your boundaries are because you think it's common decency. Like, why would you call somebody during their work time? They told you that. But people don't. And then that makes you feel like you have to actually speak up and stand up for your boundary, which feels like confrontation or being rude, and you won't do it. So therefore you get angry, right? Because you don't know how to protect the boundary in a healthy way. You're just getting mad to let them know that something's wrong. And if you're not sure how to do that, that anger and agitation can just come up, right? So the healthy boundary response in this situation would be to simply not answer the phone, even if someone does call, and then to call her back afterwards. And then if she complains that you didn't answer or she's sad or whatever, just simply reminding her that that was my work block, but I can talk to you now. And this is where you realize that you can't control someone else's emotion. This is the boundary of where you end and they begin. You're not responsible for how that person reacts to your boundary. She could get mad or sad or anything, but it's not your fault. Now, of course, if you do something mean to someone or say something mean or whatever, but you didn't. You just didn't do something she liked. And actually, you would really prefer that she be okay with it. And a loving thing is to respect each other's boundaries, right? In the same way, if she doesn't want to talk to you today, you're not going to cry about it. You're going to just respect that, right? Probably. If that's how that's how it was for me. The things I really wish people would do for me is exactly what I already do for them. And so just seeing it that way, it doesn't have to make the person sad. They are getting sad because they are trying to manipulate you and your boundaries, right? They want you to change and take away that boundary because they don't like it. But this is where the healthy boundaries comes in place. And eventually, it'll be fine. This is just an example of how it could play out in terms of like a family member kind of creeping over boundaries. And that was a healthy scenario where you actually set the boundary in place. But the unhealthy boundary would be that you just keep letting people interrupt you, right? That's the unhealthy boundary. You don't want that to happen, but you keep letting it happen and you feel like it's out of your control, but it's not, right? So the second scenario about getting aggravated when people challenge you about quitting your job, it works in the same way. If you know why you're quitting and you know how to be confident in your choice to do that, then you don't need them or anybody to believe in it, to accept it, or even like it, right? Their beliefs don't affect what you believe. That's where the boundary is, right? Like whatever they believe over there in their yard does not affect where it is in your yard. It's where they end and you begin. So they can feel how they want about it and you can feel your way and their feelings don't change you or affect you. But if you're trying to make sure that other people are happy all the time, then you're going to get frustrated and feel agitated and all of those things because you're trying to make what you want already align with how they feel, and it's not going to work. So you just get frustrated and mad and things to like show them to kind of back off. Maybe if you don't have the boundary in place, you feel like you need to defend it, or it just feels uneasy because you're doing something that you don't want to be doing. So I hope you could follow me on those two examples, but I wanted to share those to show how boundaries look in real life. And you can see they come into play in so many different areas. And those are just two examples. And there's so many other ways they could come into play. So it could be areas like your motherhood choices, your job or career choices, which direction to go in your business, listening to a coach or not, work time stuff, home stuff. I mean, the list goes on and on. And one area that can be really challenging for many entrepreneurs is the holidays coming up. Like, we're right here on it, right? And I know that for me, it came with different frustrations when I was working my full-time job and then doing the side hustle versus already being at home and the holidays coming up. Those two seasons had different kinds of boundary issues, both equally as frustrating because I didn't have the boundaries in place. So this year, it's already just totally different. And the big issue comes around what you want to do and what you're feeling like you should do, quote unquote, should do, versus what everybody else thinks that you should do. And like, there's this conflict, right? And this, again, is when, if you don't have the boundaries clear for yourself, then you're going to be really agitated this holiday season because you're either trying to please other people or doing what other entrepreneurs are doing or whatever. Like, you're going to be frustrated with your family, or you're going to be frustrated while you're working, or whatever it looks like. And we don't want that, right? We don't want to wrap up the year like a grump. So the ultimate solution, right, that's a lot easier said than done, is to simply create boundaries in all the relevant areas of your life. And you'll just feel so much less anger and frustration and guilt over saying no or yes. You'll feel less judgment from others. They might still be judging you, but you won't receive it as strongly. And you'll feel more secure in who you are and your decisions, and being in that place and knowing that God has put you where you are for a reason, and all of those truths that I talk about on the podcast, those things that you can hold on to. When you know those things and they are part of your boundaries, you're just gonna operate in a much different way. So I highly recommend getting the book and the workbook as a starting point. It's a great way to dive into this. I'll put those links in the description below. And if you're like me, you might be hearing about this and going, oh my goodness, that is so me, and I didn't even know what boundaries were or that they were to blame. But clearly I need help with this. So I used to just live in this place of constantly being aggravated with my business and my life because I had no boundaries in place. I thought that if I created boundaries, then I wasn't being very loving or Christ-like, but that's not true at all, actually. So if you think about it, Jesus was constantly holding his boundaries because he knew exactly who he was and is and what his mission was, and he wasn't going to submit to the temptations presented in front of him. Think about being in the wilderness, or just even the human temptations, the people he was constantly being poked at, like people were trying to constantly get him to be mad, and he just didn't. And that's because he knew who he was and what he was doing. And he wasn't going to change his ways to please the people that didn't like what he had to say. They can say that and even push it on him and try so hard to get him to change and even threaten him with death or to the death, right? But he wasn't going to do it if it didn't honor God with his actions. That was his boundary, not crossing it. I am not going to deny the Father, right? He is going to do exactly what he's told to do. And so that's a boundary. And I just think it's so inspiring to look at how he kind of faced a lot of opposition from family. I've talked about these a number of times on the podcast, but family or money or just different things along the way, authority figures. And he just knew what he was doing and was confident in that. And so he had these boundaries in place. So because this topic is so important and is often a hidden culprit, because I don't know about you, but like I said, I didn't even know these were a thing. They're often a hidden culprit behind many of the stressors that you're facing as an entrepreneur. So I'm going to be doing two things. So one, I'm doing a small podcast series on this topic where each episode will dive into a specific key area and how boundaries play a role and signs and of issues and how you can fix that and stuff. We're going to do probably 2 to 3 more episodes on that. And then I'm also going to be launching the new Mama with a Calling membership group that opens on Friday, on Black Friday. And we're going to be starting things off in December talking about boundaries. So remember how I said the holidays are a hard time? We're going to specifically focus on creating intentional boundaries this holiday season. So we're going to create a plan and be intentional as we go into the season to make sure that we are at peace with our business and our family life so we can truly enjoy our time and make the most of it. So if you find the holidays really stressful, or maybe you just want to avoid the potential stress of that, then you'll want to join us in there to create that intentional boundary plan around your time this holiday season as we launch the Mama with a Calling membership. So this new membership is going to only be $15 a month if you join before Cyber Monday. And the first 10 people to get in are going to get invited to be part of the Q1 Mastermind for free. So that's a $200 value and you get in there for free. So keep an eye out for those emails on that. So for more information, go to mamawithacalling.com/Black Friday. And with that, I hope this encourages you. I hope it brought some light to some things in your business, in your life that might be at play here as you are moving forward as an entrepreneur. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. And in the meantime, keep pursuing your calling. Thanks for listening to the Mama with a Calling podcast. As always, you'll find the show notes for today's episode at mamawithacalling.com/podcast. Really quick before you head out, are you loving these episodes? To make sure this podcast gets in the ears of as many mamas as possible, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. I'm going to be reading your reviews on the podcast, so I can't wait to hear from you. Also, if you know someone that needs to hear these episodes, grab a screenshot and share it on Instagram, and don't forget to tag me at Mama with a Calling so I can share it in my stories. Until next time, keep pursuing your calling.